When I first walked into the office, everything seemed ordinary. The fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead, keyboards clicked rhythmically, and the faint aroma of coffee lingered near the break room. People smiled politely as they passed, nodding greetings I returned automatically, unaware that my world was about to shift into something far more unsettling. He was the first thing I noticed, though I tried to ignore it. He sat at the far corner of the office in a gray suit, perfectly still, eyes unblinking, watching. He never spoke, never smiled, and yet I could feel him observing me, studying my every movement. At first I tried to convince myself it was nothing. Maybe he was shy, introverted, or simply focused on his work. But the feeling never left. Even when I faced my computer, pretending to type, I could sense his gaze pressing through the cubicle walls. It was as if he knew what I was thinking before I even did. The first week passed in a haze of paperwork, meetings, and introductions. Everyone else was friendly, but he remained distant, a silent observer. Small things began to unsettle me immediately. My chair would be slightly turned when I returned from a break. Objects on my desk, neatly arranged in the morning, would be subtly shifted by the time I returned. And then came the notes. Handwritten, neat, precise. Don't stay late tonight. I laughed nervously, telling myself someone was playing a prank. But when the notes appeared every day, with content that only I would know, I began to doubt my sanity. One evening, I stayed late to finish a report. The office had emptied hours earlier, leaving only the hum of the fluorescent lights and the soft whir of the air conditioner. I was absorbed in my work when I heard a faint shuffle behind me. My stomach tightened. Slowly, I turned, but there was nothing. The hallway beyond my cubicle was empty, yet I could feel it, that same oppressive awareness pressing down. I spun around again, and there he was, sitting at his desk, unmoving, staring at me with a calm that made my skin crawl. Over the next few days, the incidents escalated. My keyboard typed letters I hadn't pressed. Emails I hadn't written appeared in my sent folder. Lunch would vanish from the fridge, though it had been locked and untouched. Shadows seemed longer than they should be, stretching across walls that were perfectly straight. I would arrive early and find his chair perfectly aligned, facing my desk, even though he hadn't been there yet. My heart thumped constantly, but no one else seemed to notice anything unusual. And he remained calm, watching, waiting. I decided to confront him. "Hey, can I talk to you?" I asked, voice trembling. He didn't move. Fingers hovered over the keyboard, still. I swallowed hard. "Do you know me?" Still nothing. Only those unblinking eyes, like a predator holding its prey in place. I asked my coworkers about him, but they acted as if he didn't exist. "What coworker?" they said with polite smiles, no recognition. That night, I stayed until 9, determined to catch a glimpse of what was happening. The office was dark, long shadows stretching across the floor. I saw him in the reflection of the glass partitions, standing behind walls that weren't there seconds ago. Nights became worse. Objects on my desk formed strange patterns, arrows pointing at me, post-it notes spelling cryptic messages. My keyboard would type a single letter, pause, then continue as if composing something deliberately for me. I began hearing my name whispered softly in the empty hallways. Turning around always revealed nothing but glowing monitors and empty corridors. The sense of being watched grew unbearable. Every step, every breath, every moment was accompanied by the feeling of his eyes. One night, I decided to leave early, hoping to escape him. I walked quickly down the empty corridors. Then I froze. He was at the end of the elevator bank, unmoving, silent, staring. I tried to go around him, only to find him again, closer, blocking the path I had chosen. Every hallway, every door, every exit led me back to him. The office had become a labyrinth, and he had memorized every move I could make. Heart racing, I ran into a conference room, locking the door behind me. Silence. Then came a soft, deliberate knock on the glass. My pulse skyrocketed when I saw words appear, written neatly on the whiteboard. "You can't hide." Sleep became impossible. My mind replayed every incident, every glance, every small movement that he had somehow predicted. I considered quitting, but the thought of stepping into those hallways again, feeling his eyes on me, was unbearable. I started arriving earlier, hoping to catch him, to see a flaw, to understand if he was human at all. But there was nothing, just the calm, unblinking stare, the patient presence, the knowledge that he had been watching me from the beginning. Eventually, I left. My desk remained empty, emails unanswered, chair abandoned, yet the office continued as if nothing had happened. He sat at his cubicle, perfectly still, perfectly calm, watching nothing and everything at once, waiting for the next intern, the next person to walk in and think the office is safe. I realized then that some presences are invisible to everyone else. Some horrors leave no trace. They don't move, don't speak, and yet they see everything. They simply wait. Even now, I can't forget him. His gaze haunts my dreams, a shadow in the corners of my vision. His silence echoes in empty hallways. And I know, without a doubt, that he is still there, waiting for the next newcomer, the next ordinary person who believes the office is harmless. The silent colleague waits, and no one else notices. It started as a normal day at the office. I had just finished a long morning of meetings and paperwork, my head aching from endless spreadsheets and phone calls. When the clock hit 6, I packed my bag and headed toward the elevator, eager to leave the office and finally go home. The building was empty, the fluorescent lights dimmed to a dull glow, the hallways eerily silent. Only the faint hum of the air conditioning accompanied me as I stepped into the elevator, pressing the button for the ground floor. At first, everything seemed normal. The doors closed smoothly, the elevator started its descent, and I leaned back against the wall, grateful for the motion after a long day. Then, without warning, the elevator shuddered violently. The lights flickered, casting shadows that danced across the mirrored walls. My stomach lurched as the floor jolted, and I instinctively pressed all the buttons, trying to stop it, to regain some control, but the elevator didn't respond. Every floor button I pressed lit up, then went dark again, as if the elevator was ignoring me entirely. Panic started to creep in. I pressed the emergency button. Nothing. I tried my phone, no signal. I was completely trapped, the confined space suddenly feeling like a cage. Then I heard it. A soft, deliberate whisper from the corner of the elevator. "Don't leave." My heart skipped a beat. I spun around, but the mirrored walls reflected only me, wide-eyed and shaking. There was no one else, yet I felt it. A presence, unseen but heavy, pressing down on me. The elevator jolted again, violently, throwing me off balance. The lights flickered once more, and in that moment I saw it. A figure, faint and distorted, hovering near the back wall. Its features were blurry, almost like smoke or static, but I could feel its gaze, cold and unrelenting. I stumbled backward, hitting the elevator wall, and it seemed to smile, though no mouth could be seen. I pressed the buttons frantically, willing it to stop, to let me go. But the elevator continued its relentless descent. Time lost all meaning. Minutes stretched into hours, or maybe only seconds, I couldn't tell. The mirrored walls reflected the figure at every angle, multiplying its presence until I felt surrounded. Shadows flickered across the ceiling as the lights flickered violently, and I could hear whispers, growing louder, more insistent. Stay forever. The words echoed in my head, not spoken aloud, yet unmistakable. I tried to scream, but the sound seemed to vanish before it left my throat. I pressed the emergency button again, holding it down this time. A crackling voice came over the intercom, distorted, almost mechanical. Elevator malfunction. Please remain calm. But it wasn't calm. The voice didn't belong to any human I had ever heard. It carried a chilling undertone, as if it were laughing at my panic. The elevator jolted again violently, and the lights went out completely. In the darkness, I could hear the whispering, all around me coming from inside my own head. You can't escape. When the lights returned, I noticed something worse. The floor numbers were no longer moving downward. They blinked erratically. 13, 42, 7, 0. Some numbers didn't exist in this building. The elevator continued to move, but it felt endless, like it had left reality entirely. Each time the doors opened, I expected a hallway, a lobby, someone who could help. But every time there was only darkness beyond the doors, a void stretching infinitely, swallowing the faint glow of the emergency lights. I pressed the buttons desperately, hoping to return to the ground floor, to any floor, but the elevator ignored me. Hours passed. I couldn't tell if I was awake or dreaming. Every mirror reflected the figure, closer now, its shape more defined. It had no face, only black, empty hollows where eyes should be. Yet I could feel its gaze drilling into me, reading my fear, feeding on it. I tried to look away, to close my eyes, but even then I could sense it. My own shadow seemed to move independently, stretching unnaturally, wrapping around me like a second skin. Then something changed. The elevator stopped abruptly, and the doors opened. I expected to see the lobby, maybe someone who could help, but the hallway was different, darker, colder. The lights flickered weakly, revealing walls that were cracked, stained with something dark I couldn't identify. A faint humming sound vibrated through the air, almost like a chant, low and steady, calling me forward. My legs moved on their own, drawing me into the hallway, away from the elevator and back into the unknown. I could feel it behind me, following silently, moving with me even though no footsteps echoed. I turned, expecting the figure, but saw only darkness. Yet the presence was undeniable. I ran, desperate for some exit, some sign of normalcy, but every hallway led me back to the elevator. It was as if the building itself had trapped me, reshaped reality to keep me inside. My phone remained useless, my calls unanswered. I was utterly alone, and yet never alone. Whispers grew louder. They weren't words anymore, just sounds, moans, the faint screech of metal on metal. The elevator doors opened again, and I stepped inside, hoping to find release. But it had changed. The walls were scratched, symbols etched deeply into the metal. Shadows moved across the floor, forming shapes that shouldn't exist. I pressed the buttons desperately, every floor, every combination, anything. And then the figure appeared again. At the far end of the elevator, faintly visible in the dim light, it smiled, a mouthless smile, cold and knowing, and the whisper reached a crescendo in my mind. You belong here now. Panic overwhelmed me. I slammed every button, shook the walls, screamed until my voice cracked, but the elevator responded only to the figure, its pace unyielding, carrying me further into the endless floors of the building that shouldn't exist. The mirrored walls multiplied its presence until I was surrounded from all sides. Every reflection showed it closer, waiting, patient, eternal. I realized then that this was no ordinary elevator. It was alive, aware, feeding on fear, and the figure, whatever it was its guide. Eventually, exhaustion took over. My body slumped against the wall, eyes closed, mind racing. When I dared to open my eyes again, the elevator had stopped. The doors opened to a lobby that looked real, familiar, almost safe. I ran out without looking back, fleeing into the street, gasping for air, praying that I had escaped. But the image of the figure stayed with me. Its hollow gaze burned into my mind. I knew deep down that I hadn't escaped at all. The elevator was patient. It would wait. It would come again. And next time, it wouldn't let go. Even now, months later, I avoid elevators. Every metallic box, every hum of motors, every flicker of light sends my heart racing. And I know that somewhere, in some building I don't even recognize, the elevator waits, endless and unyielding, and the figure inside, patient and eternal, is waiting for the next passenger. It started on an ordinary Monday morning. I was scrolling through my inbox, sifting through dozens of emails, work memos, newsletters, meeting reminders, when one subject line caught my eye. From me. My heart skipped a beat. At first, I laughed nervously. Surely it was a joke, or maybe an email glitch. I clicked it, expecting some mundane mistake, but the message that opened was anything but ordinary. It was addressed to me from my own email address, time-stamped just moments ago. The subject line was blank, but the body of the email contained a single line. Don't go to work today. My first thought was a prank. Maybe a friend had hacked my account. But the chilling part wasn't just that it came from me. It was that the message contained personal details no one else could know. It mentioned my breakfast, the shirt I had worn, even that I had skipped brushing my hair this morning. I shook it off, assuming it was some clever trick. I deleted the email and went about my day. But when I reached my office, the same feeling of unease I had first felt returned, stronger. The office seemed quieter than usual. My coworkers were in their usual chatter, but I felt an invisible weight pressing down on me, a sense that someone was watching. Then my computer pinged again. Another email from myself. This time, the email contained more than a warning. It described the next few minutes in detail. You will spill coffee on your desk. You will hear a knock at the door at 10:17 a.m. I glanced at the clock. It was 10:15. My hands trembled as I reached for my coffee. The liquid slipped through my fingers, splattering across the keyboard, just as the email had predicted. My pulse raced. A knock sounded at my office door, sharp and deliberate. I froze. My coworker peeked in, innocently, asking a question, but the sense of dread lingered. Over the next few days, the emails continued, each more detailed and personal than the last. They predicted conversations I would have, mistakes I would make, even thoughts I had not spoken aloud. Each message came minutes before the event occurred, like some sinister forecast, as if the emails themselves were alive, observing me, manipulating my reality. I began to dread my own inbox. Each ping made my stomach tighten. Each subject line made my heart pound. One evening, I stayed late to finish a report, determined to confront the situation. The office was dark, save for the glow of my monitor. The silence was suffocating. Then, the familiar ping. Another email from myself. My hands shook as I opened it. The message read, "Turn around. You are not alone." I froze. Slowly, I turned in my chair. The office appeared empty, but the air felt heavy, oppressive. Shadows seemed longer, stretching unnaturally across the floor. I could sense a presence just beyond the edge of perception, watching, waiting. Panic rose. I tried to close the email, to shut down the computer, but the screen flickered and returned to the message unchanged. The words seemed to shift slightly, rearranging themselves as I stared. You can't escape this. You are already inside. My breath quickened. I felt the room close in, the walls pressing down. Every sound, the hum of the computers, the soft ticking of the clock, even my own heartbeat was amplified. The next day, I didn't go to work. I sat at home, staring at my laptop, trying to understand what was happening. Then, another email arrived from myself. The subject line read, "I warned you." The message contained a detailed account of my night, every movement, every thought, every fear I had felt. My pulse raced. I tried to delete the email, to close the laptop, but the screen wouldn't respond. The cursor moved on its own, typing words I hadn't written. You cannot stop this. You cannot ignore it. I started to notice small changes in my environment. Shadows shifted when I wasn't looking. Objects moved slightly, as if nudged by an invisible hand. The sense of being observed grew unbearable. Each time I opened my laptop, another email awaited me, predicting my day in terrifying detail. I tried to change my routine to avoid the patterns the emails described. But no matter what I did, the emails were always one step ahead. One evening, in a desperate attempt to understand, I decided to trace the emails. I followed every lead, every header, every server path. But each time I thought I was getting closer, the data would change, redirect, vanish. It was as if the emails were alive, constantly adapting, constantly observing me. My laptop became a prison, my own identity a weapon against me. I realized with a sinking heart that it wasn't just an email. It was me, or at least a version of me, aware, patient, and terrifying. Days merged into nights. My sleep was fractured by nightmares in which I saw myself typing messages I had never written. Each dream ended with the same line: you can't escape yourself. In the waking world, the emails continued, predicting my every action, documenting my every move. I stopped answering the phone. I stopped leaving my apartment. I stopped opening my laptop. And yet, the emails came. From me. Always from me. Finally, I reached the point of exhaustion. My hands trembled as I stared at the latest email. It read simply, "I am here. Always. And I am you." The words seemed to burn on the screen, pulsing, alive. I wanted to close it, to delete it, to tear the laptop apart, but I couldn't. I realized in that moment that there was no escape. I had become both the sender and the receiver, trapped in a loop of my own making. Even now, the emails continue. Each new message brings a creeping sense of dread, a reminder that some horrors come not from strangers, shadows, or ghosts, but from ourselves, from parts of our mind we don't understand, don't control. The email from myself is no ordinary message. It is a warning, a prophecy, and a prison. And I know deep down that it will never stop and I will never be free.
It was just past 9 when the phone rang. The office was empty, except for me. The hum of fluorescent lights filled the room, mingling with the faint whir of the air conditioning. I had stayed late to finish a pile of paperwork that had been growing all week. At first, I ignored the ringing, assuming it was a wrong number, but it kept going, insistent, shrill against the silence. My heart began to beat faster. Picking it up, I said cautiously, "Hello?" There was silence at first. Then a voice, low and distorted, whispered, "I see you." I froze. It didn't sound like anyone I knew. Not a coworker, not a friend. It was rough, echoing, almost metallic. I laughed nervously, thinking it was a prank, someone trying to scare me. Very funny, I muttered, but my voice trembled. There was no response, only the faintest sound of breathing. Then the line went dead. Shaking off the unease, I returned to my work, but the phone rang again a few minutes later. And again. Each time I answered, there was only that distorted whisper, "I'm watching you." Panic began to seep in. I looked around the empty office, the long hallway stretching into darkness. Shadows clung to the corners, seemingly moving closer whenever I glanced at them. I wanted to leave, to run, but my legs felt heavy, as if rooted to the spot. Over the next hour, the calls became more frequent, more precise. The voice would describe what I was doing. "You're stapling those papers too slowly. You dropped your pen. Look behind you." I glanced over my shoulder. No one. The office remained deserted, yet the voice knew everything, every small action, every thought I hadn't spoken aloud. I started to feel trapped, a prey under the watchful eyes of something unseen. I tried calling the security desk. No answer. Every number I dialed went straight to silence. Even my cell phone, sitting on my desk, showed only static. My pulse raced as I realized that the voice wasn't just in the phone. It was inside my head. The whispers grew louder, echoing through the empty office. "I'm closer than you think." My stomach turned, a cold sweat breaking out across my back. Then came the scratching. Soft at first, almost imperceptible, like fingernails dragging along the walls. I froze, listening. The sound grew louder, circling the office, bouncing off the walls. Every shadow seemed alive, stretching towards me, twisting unnaturally. I ran to the main door, but it wouldn't budge. Locked. I tried the windows, all sealed. The office that had seemed ordinary only moments ago had become a cage, and I knew, with sinking dread, that the calls were just the beginning. The next call was different, clearer, close. The voice whispered, "Turn around." I obeyed slowly, dread coiling in my chest. At the far end of the hallway, a shadow moved. It was tall, impossibly thin, and its shape seemed to shift, flickering in and out of sight. I blinked. It was gone, but I could feel its gaze, heavy and malevolent. Every hair on my body stood on end. The office felt alive, twisted, waiting. I tried hiding in a supply closet, my hands shaking as I locked the door. The phone rang inside the closet. My breath caught in my throat. I didn't pick it up. I couldn't. The whispers continued, now coming from everywhere and nowhere, surrounding me in a cacophony of fear. I could hear my own heartbeat pounding in my ears, matching the rhythm of the scratches, the whispers, the distorted voice that knew me better than I knew myself. Hours, or maybe minutes, passed. Time had lost meaning. I couldn't tell if I was awake or trapped in a nightmare. Every shadow moved. Every flicker of light seemed to pulse with intent. The voice spoke again, this time with unmistakable clarity. "I've been waiting for you all night." I wanted to scream, but the sound caught in my throat. I felt a cold hand brush against my shoulder. I spun around. Nothing. Just the dim glow of emergency exit signs casting weak light across the floor. Eventually, I forced myself out of the closet. The office was empty, eerily still. The phones were silent now, but the air was heavy, oppressive. Every step I took felt like an intrusion, like I was being drawn into some unseen trap. At my desk, a note lay waiting. Written in jagged black ink were the words, "Next time, I won't wait." My stomach dropped. The note was unsigned, but I needed a signature. I knew who it was meant to be from. I left the office that night, running down the empty streets, never looking back. But the fear didn't end there. The calls continued, though less frequent. A static-filled whisper on my voicemail, a distorted message on my cell phone, always reminding me, I'm still here. I realized with a sickening certainty that this presence had followed me out of the office. It didn't belong to the building, to the hallway, or even to the phones. It belonged to me now, shadowing every move, waiting for the next after hours. Even today, whenever I hear the faintest ring, my heart stops. The office doors behind me, the empty hallways, the distant hum of electricity, it all reminds me that I am being watched, that I am never truly alone. The after-hours caller isn't just a voice on the line. It is patience. It is waiting. It is inevitable. And I know, deep down, that when the office empties again, it will come for me. And next time, it won't wait.
It started as any other Monday morning. I walked into the conference room, coffee in hand, ready for the weekly team meeting. The room was dimly lit, the blinds drawn, casting long shadows across the polished table. My coworkers were already seated, murmuring quietly, their faces expressionless. The manager, someone I had only recently met, stood at the head of the table with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The meeting began normally. Agenda points were read, tasks were assigned, and the usual discussions unfolded. But soon, something felt off. The conversation seemed repetitive. Every comment, every suggestion, even every objection I or my coworkers made was met with the same responses we had heard countless times before. It was subtle at first, a repeated phrase here, a repeated point there, but soon it became undeniable. Nothing new was happening. Minutes stretched into hours. The clock on the wall ticked slowly, each second echoing in the oppressive silence that had replaced normal office chatter. I tried to speak up, to change the topic, but my words were drowned out by the manager's monotone repetition. Each phrase, each question, even the familiar as if we were trapped in some endless loop of conversation. My stomach tightened. I glanced around the table. My coworkers' faces were blank, eerily calm, their eyes glazed over, unseeing. I tried to leave. I stood abruptly, heart racing. "Excuse me, I need to—" The manager cut me off before I could finish. "Let's stay focused. We're not finished yet." His voice was smooth, authoritative, yet there was an undercurrent of menace. I opened the door behind me. The hallway stretched endlessly, unfamiliar and dimly lit. Though I knew exactly where I was, the corridor twisted impossibly, looping back toward the conference room. Panic began to rise. I returned to my seat. The manager continued as if nothing had happened, flipping to slides that repeated exactly what had been said minutes ago. My coworkers nodded along, eyes blank, hands resting on the table, motionless. I whispered to the person next to me, trying to break the pattern. "Do you notice this? It's the same—" They stared at me silently, then repeated the exact words I had just said, as if reading from a script. I recoiled. Something unnatural was happening. The meeting dragged on. Hours passed, or perhaps days. I could no longer tell. My mind ached, my muscles stiffened, but the manager's voice continued, never faltering. Slides changed, papers were shuffled, discussions repeated. I tried everything to disrupt it, asking questions, standing up, knocking over my coffee cup. Nothing worked. The cycle continued, relentless and unyielding. I noticed subtle details. The clock never moved forward. The sunlight outside the blinds remained static, frozen at mid-morning. The air felt thick, heavy, as though we were submerged underwater. Every attempt to leave failed. Doors led me back to the same room. Windows revealed only the same pale sky. And through it all, the manager's smile remained calm, constant, impossible. Desperation set in. I searched for any exit, any way to break the loop. I tore the papers on the table, crumbled the slides, shouted at the walls. My voice echoed, swallowed by the oppressive silence that seemed to consume the room itself. My coworkers watched silently, eyes vacant, then mimicked my actions perfectly, repeating them as if rehearsing some horrifying play. I realized then that the room was alive, feeding off our fear, our attempts to escape. Hours blurred. I could feel my sanity fraying, every phrase, every sentence repeated endlessly, looping into infinity. My thoughts became tangled with the manager's monotone instructions. I tried counting seconds, minutes, hours. The clock refused to cooperate. I tried keeping a journal, writing down the repetition, but my handwriting dissolved into scribbles that made no sense, as if the room itself rejected my attempt to record time. Then came the whispers, soft at first, behind the monotone voice, subtle and dissonant. They became louder, clearer, echoing from the walls, the table, even from inside my own head. You can't leave. You will never leave. This meeting never ends. The words drilled into my mind, relentless, unyielding. My coworkers' blank stares seemed to intensify. The manager's smile widened slightly, though the expression remained impossibly perfect, horrifyingly calm. I tried to sleep, closing my eyes at the table, but the repetition continued even in darkness. In my mind, the slides flickered endlessly, every sentence, every phrase repeated ad nauseum. I could feel myself being consumed, absorbed into the meeting itself. I whispered a plea to anyone at all, outside. Help! Someone, please! My words dissolved into the monotone, swallowed by the endless cycle. Eventually, I stopped trying to resist. My body slumped, my hands rested on the table, my eyes glazed over. I became part of the rhythm, part of the loop. The manager continued speaking, my coworkers nodded, and the slides changed once again. I realized with chilling clarity, I was trapped. The meeting wasn't just a room, a schedule, or a routine. It was a prison, a never-ending loop designed to consume those who entered. Time had no meaning, reality had no meaning, only the meeting existed. Even now, in the rare moments when I glimpse sunlight or hear a clock tick, I know the meeting continues. Somewhere, the manager's voice repeats, and the slides change endlessly. The room waits for the next participant, the next unsuspecting soul to step inside and never leave. And I, now a silent observer among the blank faces, understand fully, some meetings are not meant to end. They go on forever, eternal, inescapable, and merciless.
It began subtly. At first, I didn't notice anything unusual. I arrived at the office each morning, greeted by the usual hum of computers, the soft chatter of coworkers, and the faint aroma of coffee from the break room. But over the first week, I began to sense it. Someone was always just slightly behind me, always watching. The feeling wasn't constant, but it was persistent, like a shadow lurking at the edge of my vision. I tried to ignore it. Surely it was just my imagination. Perhaps the office layout, the rows of cubicles, the fluorescent lights were playing tricks on me. But then the small things began. Files I had left on my desk would be moved. Pins vanished only to appear in strange places. Sticky notes with reminders I hadn't written showed up overnight. It felt deliberate,
meticulous, calculated. Someone was observing every move I made. One evening, I stayed late to finish a report. The office was silent, empty, save for the hum of the air conditioning and the faint clatter of my own typing. That's when I first saw them. A figure, half hidden behind the cubicles, watching. I froze. My pulse quickened. I blinked, and they were gone. I convinced myself it was a trick of the dim lights, that exhaustion had created an illusion, yet the feeling of being watched persisted, intensifying with every passing hour. Over the next few days, the stalking escalated. I began to find notes, typed messages left in my workspace. Some were cryptic, almost taunting. "You left the file open. I see you checking your phone. Why are you looking at me?" I started to dread each day, each hour, each glance toward the neighboring cubicles. I became paranoid. Every movement, every sound, every shadow was scrutinized. The office felt alive, and the watcher within it, patient and relentless. I reported it to HR. They were polite, professional, but dismissive. "Perhaps you're imagining things," one manager suggested. "The office is big. There are lots of people." But I knew it wasn't imagination. The pattern was too precise. The timing too perfect. Whoever was stalking me knew my routine, my habits, even my thoughts. I began to avoid looking up, kept my movements minimal, tried to blend into my chair, hoping the observer would lose interest. Then one night, the stalker made a mistake. I had stayed late again, determined to finish a project. The office was empty, except for me. I heard a soft shuffle behind me. My heart raced, but I forced myself to remain calm. Slowly, I turned. The figure was there, just beyond the cubicle wall, staring. Its face was partially hidden, features distorted by shadows. I could see eyes, dark, unblinking, intent. A shiver ran down my spine. My breath caught in my throat. I tried to speak, to ask what they wanted, but my voice failed me. The figure remained silent, only watching, unyielding. Then, almost imperceptibly, it moved closer. My chair scraped against the floor as I shifted back, but the figure advanced, merging seamlessly with the shadows. Panic surged. I grabbed my laptop, clutching it like a shield, and ran to the nearest exit. The lights flickered, and I felt their presence everywhere, following, patient, omnipresent. After that night, I changed my routine. I avoided the late shifts, arrived earlier, left sooner. I moved my workspace whenever I could. Yet the stalking continued. Notes appeared in my desk drawers, messages on my computer, and once a sticky note on my monitor. "I'm closer than you think." I began sleeping poorly, haunted by the memory of those unblinking eyes, the feeling of being watched even in my apartment. One afternoon, I decided to confront it. I stayed late, hiding behind the cubicle walls, waiting. Hours passed. The office grew silent. The shadows lengthened. And then I saw it. The stalker, a figure draped in black, moving without sound, its eyes locked on mine. I stood my ground, demanding, "Who are you? What do you want?" It tilted its head, almost curiously, and whispered, "My name." My blood ran cold. The voice was familiar, impossibly so, like someone I knew, yet not. The stalker vanished before I could react. Nothing was left behind but the echo of its whisper and the feeling of being hunted. From that night on, I knew I wasn't alone. Every cubicle became a potential hiding place. Every shadow held eyes.
Every soft sound could be the stalker moving, always patient, always watching. Months passed. I tried to leave, transferred departments, even changed offices. Yet the sense of being followed never left. Notes continued to appear, whispers persisted in my dreams. The stalker had become part of my life, inseparable, eternal. I could see the same shadow in reflections, in windows, even in photographs I took of the office. The figure was always there, waiting, patient, unyielding. And one day, it would move closer than ever, and there would be no hiding, no escape, and no one left to notice.
It started subtly, as most horrors do. New managers arrive, shake hands, smile politely, and gradually reveal themselves. But when Mr. Caldwell took over our department, something about him felt wrong. He was polite, punctual, efficient, the perfect manager on paper. Yet, the first time he looked directly at me, I felt a cold pressure behind my eyes, a weight pressing down on my chest. And then I noticed it. He never blinked, not once, not a single time. At first, I assumed it was a nervous tic, or perhaps a medical condition, but as days passed, the realization sank in. No matter how long we spoke, how many meetings he led, he never once blinked. His gaze followed me relentlessly. I began to feel exposed, as if he could see not just my actions, but my thoughts. The office, normally a place of mundane routine, had become a chamber of constant observation. Every glance toward his desk or his corner office was met with that unwavering, unblinking stare. The discomfort grew. I found myself avoiding eye contact, slumping in my chair, pretending to focus on spreadsheets. But his presence was inescapable. He attended every meeting, always standing silently at the edge, eyes fixed on me, and though no one else seemed aware, I could feel the intensity of his attention like a physical force. Then, odd things began happening. Reports I hadn't yet finished appeared on his desk. Emails I hadn't sent were opened in my inbox. It was as if he anticipated every move, every mistake, every thought. I joked nervously with coworkers, asking if they noticed anything strange. They shrugged, oblivious, as if nothing unusual existed. Only I could feel it, that unblinking gaze, the unseen weight of scrutiny. One evening, I stayed late to finish a report. The office was silent, illuminated only by the glow of my computer screen. That's when I heard the soft click of heels on the floor. My pulse quickened. Mr. Caldwell appeared as though materializing from the shadows. I glanced up and froze. His eyes, impossibly wide, fixed on mine, unblinking and eternal. I couldn't look away. Time seemed to stretch. Seconds felt like hours. My hands shook, incapable of continuing my work. Leaving soon? His voice was calm, controlled, monotone. I nodded mutely, trying to keep my composure, but I could feel it. The pressure, the weight of those eyes boring into me, stripping away my defenses, my thoughts laid bare. I hurriedly packed my bag, but it was as if the distance between us didn't exist. No matter how many steps I took toward the door, his gaze remained, unyielding, constant. After that night, I noticed more than just the staring. My coworkers began to behave differently. They walked past his office, eyes down, whispering quietly, never questioning. The office atmosphere became tense, charged, as if an invisible presence ruled over us all. Any mistake, any deviation from routine was met with an unseen reprimand.
I began to dread every interaction, every glance at his office. Then the strange messages started, notes left on my desk. Keep moving, stay quiet, don't look. At first, I thought it was a prank, but the handwriting was eerily familiar, my own, yet I had no memory of writing them. The feeling of being watched became suffocating. I couldn't concentrate. My sleep became fragmented, haunted by visions of eyes, wide, unblinking, following me even in darkness. One afternoon, I attempted to confront him. I walked into his office, determined to ask what was going on. "Mr. Caldwell," I began, voice shaking. "What's happening here?" His gaze met mine, and I realized with bone-deep horror that he was not human, or perhaps he had never been. The unblinking stare seemed to pierce through time itself, seeing every thought I had ever had and every secret I had ever kept. My voice caught in my throat. Words failed me. "You shouldn't be here alone," he said, calm, almost amused. The words didn't feel like a threat. They felt inevitable. As I backed away, the office walls seemed to stretch, the ceiling lowering, shadows pooled in corners, the fluorescent lights flickered, and I realized, with horror, that I wasn't just being watched. I was being measured, evaluated, absorbed into his perception until nothing of my autonomy remained. From that moment, I understood. The manager didn't just observe, he consumed attention, fear, and focus. Every glance, every interaction, every heartbeat was cataloged, absorbed, stored. Days blended into nights. I tried transferring departments, but the pressure followed me. He appeared in hallways, in meetings, in reflections, sometimes just the shadow of his gaze, sometimes his fully unblinking eyes fully visible, always watching, always present. Even outside the office, I felt it, in reflections in windows, in photographs, in television broadcasts. Those eyes were there, unblinking, patient, eternal. No one else could see it, but I could. And each time I thought I had escaped, I realized with sickening clarity, I never would. The manager who never blinks doesn't just watch. He waits. He waits for attention, for fear, for the moment when he can draw you into his world entirely. Now, whenever I pass a corner office or hear footsteps behind me in a quiet corridor, my pulse races. I know he is somewhere observing, measuring. The office isn't a building. It's a trap, a construct maintained by a gaze that never falters. And I know that if you ever meet him, if you ever make eye contact, you will never look at the world the same way again. Because some horrors aren't sudden. They are constant. They are patient. And the manager who never blinks will never stop watching.
It started innocently enough. A new employee had left my department, and with them, their cubicle desk was cleared out and reassigned. The office manager told me I could move some of my things there temporarily to spread out my work. The desk was ordinary, a plain gray metal frame, drawers that squeaked when opened, a faded nameplate still clinging to the corner. But from the moment I sat down, something felt wrong. At first, it was subtle. Papers I left on the desk would be slightly rearranged when I returned. Pens would roll across the surface without explanation. I assumed I was tired, imagining movement in the periphery of my vision. But the feeling of being watched grew stronger each day. Sitting at that desk, I felt a pressure behind me, like invisible eyes studying my every move. One night, I stayed late to finish a report. The office was silent, dimly lit by the glow of my monitor. I was typing when I felt a soft tap on my shoulder. I spun around. No one was there. A draft of cold air brushed past my face. My heart raced. The desk in front of me, the one I had thought was ordinary, seemed different. Shadows pooled beneath it, darker than the surrounding floor, stretching unnaturally. The next morning, I noticed something disturbing. On my keyboard, a single sticky note appeared, handwritten in a spidery script I didn't recognize. "You shouldn't be here." I laughed nervously, thinking it a prank, but no one in the office had arrived yet. The note was real, sitting neatly on my desk. I picked it up, my hands shaking, and it crumpled in my grip, turning to dust before my eyes. From that day on, the desk seemed alive. Objects moved on their own. My coffee cup would be full one moment and empty the next. Files I had meticulously organized would be scattered across the floor, replaced by papers I had never seen. Sometimes I would leave the office briefly, and when I returned, the chair would be turned toward the door as if waiting. I felt trapped, constantly under the gaze of something unseen. One evening, I decided to confront it. I sat at the desk, refusing to leave, trying to observe any movement. Hours passed. The office was silent. Then, as the clock struck midnight, I heard it. The faint scrape of a chair moving across the floor. I looked up. The desk drawers began to open and close on their own, one by one. The nameplate trembled, and I saw, reflected in the polished surface of the metal frame, a figure standing behind me. I spun around. Nothing. The figure was gone. Yet the pressure, the oppressive feeling of being watched, remained. My computer screen flickered. On it, words appeared in bold, jagged font. "You cannot leave." I tried to shut down the computer, to escape the desk, but my arms wouldn't obey. The desk seemed to anchor me, tether me, feeding on my fear and hesitation. Over the following weeks, I noticed the pattern. The desk always waited. It was calm during the day, pretending to be ordinary, but after hours, it revealed its true nature. Chairs would move, drawers would open, and faint whispers would echo from the empty drawers. "Sit, stay, forever." I tried transferring offices, changing floors, even swapping desks. Nothing worked. Wherever I went, the phantom desk seemed to find me, always present, patient, relentless. I stopped talking about it. No one would believe me. And deep down, I knew that explaining it would be pointless. The desk wasn't just furniture. It was something older, something patient, waiting for anyone careless enough to sit in its space. It watched. It learned. It consumed attention. And those who lingered too long found themselves trapped. Sometimes late at night, I dream of the desk. Its drawers stretch into infinity darkness. Its metal frame twists and bends impossibly. Papers fly across the surface in chaotic patterns. And always the whispers, "You should never have sat here." I wake with the feeling of hands on my shoulders, of cold breath on my neck, and I know the desk has followed me into my own life. Even now, when I pass through an empty office, I glance at each cubicle, each vacant desk, and I wonder which one is waiting, which one has eyes, which one, like the phantom desk, will claim the next person foolish enough to sit and never leave. I've learned to avoid looking too closely, to keep moving, but I know deep down that the desk is patient, and one day it will wait for me again, or someone else, and its hunger will not be denied.
The first time I heard the voice, I thought it was just someone talking on the phone. The break room in our office always echoed strangely. Tile floors, mill chairs, and the old humming vending machine that never quite shut up. I remember walking in, half asleep, expecting the usual stale smell of coffee and microwaved leftovers. But that morning, something felt off. The lights were dimmer than usual, one of the bulbs flickering like it was struggling to stay alive. The room was empty. No footsteps, no voices, nothing. Yet as I stepped closer to the counter to pour myself coffee, I heard it. A whisper, A very clear whisper. "Don't turn around." I froze. My hand stiffened around the coffee pot. The voice was right behind me, too close, too soft, too real. It didn't sound like anyone from the office. Not the receptionist, not the manager, not a coworker. It sounded layered, like several voices speaking together but perfectly synchronized. I spun around anyway. No one was there. The room looked completely normal, except for the chair at the far end of the table. It was turned slightly outward, like someone had been sitting there moments ago. But the seat was empty. I left the break room without my coffee. That should have been the end of it. I should have shrugged it off as lack of sleep or a trick of acoustics. But that next day, the voice returned. And this time, it knew my name. Ethan. Sweet, almost gentle, but stretched, like a whisper pulled too tightly through wires. I stepped into the break room, my breath already shaky, and scanned every corner. Empty. I could see my reflection in the microwave door, wide eyes, pale face, paranoia already settling in. Sit down. I didn't want to. Every part of me screamed not to, but something in the voice tugged at my nerves, like invisible fingers pressing against the back of my neck. The chair in the corner creaked by itself, slowly, deliberately. I backed away and left the room. Again. By the third day, no part of me could pretend it wasn't real anymore. That morning, around 7:30 a.m., I arrived earlier than usual. HR had called a mandatory meeting, so most of the staff was expected to come in early. The office was dim and cold, lights not fully powered on yet. As I walked past the break room, my footsteps stopped on their own. The door was slightly open, and someone inside was crying. At least that's what it sounded like. A faint, shaky sob, like a grown man trying not to break down. "Hello?" I asked, pushing the door open. The room was completely empty. But the crying didn't stop. It simply changed. Soft sobbing shifted into a low, throaty chuckle, then into a whisper. "Do you hear it too, Ethan?" My skin crawled. "Who are you?" I snapped. The vending machine rattled violently, then went dead silent. Even its usual hum faded. The entire room felt colder, as if something had sucked the warmth out of the air. Someone took my shift. Someone took my hours. Someone took my desk. Its voice cracked, not with emotion, with rage. The lights blazed back on, flooding the room with sickening brightness. I blinked, and the creature vanished. Just gone. I stumbled out of the break room, gasping for air like I had been drowning. I told my coworkers, the manager, even HR. Everyone laughed it off. Stress, sleep deprivation, too much horror on YouTube. But the office cameras didn't laugh. The footage from that morning showed me stepping into the break room, then the door slamming shut. The lights inside flickered violently, then went black. For 4 minutes, nothing moved. Nothing visible, at least. Then the door opened, and I stumbled out, pale and shaking. The company's IT team said the break room camera had glitched. Of course it did. For days after, I avoided the room entirely. I'd skip lunch, avoid coffee, stay at my desk for hours.
But on Thursday evening, as I was leaving the office, I heard it again. A whisper. Right behind me. Ethan, you forgot your break. The break room door was open. All the lights inside were off, but something moved in the darkness, just a faint shape shifting like a silhouette waiting for me to notice it. I ran, didn't look back. The next morning, the break room was closed off, yellow tape across the doorway, a sign reading, "Maintenance, do not enter." I asked the manager what happened. She said the ceiling collapsed overnight. Tiles shattered everywhere. The pipes inside the ceiling looked shredded from the inside, like something had clawed through them. But the part that froze my blood was this. Underneath the broken ceiling tiles, they found an old ID badge, dusty, cracked, belonging to an employee who had gone missing years ago. He'd disappeared during his shift. Last seen in the break room. I never went back. I quit the following week, but sometimes, late at night, when the office is quiet, the staff still hear whispers coming from behind the sealed break room door. And every now and then, someone swears they hear a voice saying, "Sit down. Stay a while. Don't leave me alone again." It was supposed to be a dream come true, an internship at a prestigious company, a chance to learn, to network, to prove myself. My name is Clara, and the first day was thrilling. The office was sleek, modern, filled with busy employees typing furiously at their computers. Conference rooms glowing with muted lights, phones ringing in rapid succession. Everything seemed normal. Everything seemed safe. But the internship had its oddities. For starters, no one seemed to know who I was. I introduced myself multiple times, to the receptionist, to my team lead, even to the manager. Each time they nodded politely and said, "Yes, of course, Clara, welcome." But their smiles were empty, hollow, as if they had never seen me before. I dismissed it as first-day nerves. The tasks were simple at first: data entry, filing, preparing coffee orders. But I noticed strange patterns. The documents I filed were already filled. The emails I sent were unread, or worse, never appeared at all. Sometimes I would leave the office for a short break, and when I returned, my desk would be gone. Not moved, gone. My chair, my computer, my papers vanished, replaced by an empty cubicle. I mentioned it to my supervisor, a young man named Alex. He smiled and said, "Don't worry, the system is old. Things get misplaced sometimes." But I could see it in his eyes, the same vacant, unreadable expression that had greeted me every morning. Something was off. Very off. By the end of my first week, I began to feel like a ghost. I walked the hallways and nobody acknowledged me. The staff passed by as if I didn't exist. Even when I tried to join meetings, the chairs remained empty, my voice swallowed before it could register. I started questioning my sanity. Perhaps it wasn't the office that was strange, but me. Then came the nights. One late evening, I stayed back to complete a project. The office was silent, except for the hum of the fluorescent lights. I walked past the empty cubicles and noticed a shadow in the corner, a young intern hunched over a laptop, typing furiously. But when I approached, he vanished. Just vanished. No chair, no laptop, no sign that he had ever been there. A week later, I saw him again, in the same cubicle corner, typing, completely absorbed. I called out, "Hey, are you okay?" But again, he disappeared before my eyes. I began to keep notes, documenting everything, trying to prove to myself that I wasn't losing my mind. Every detail mattered. The timing, the cubicle location, the way his shoulders hunched. Then, one morning, Alex approached me. His smile was thin, strained. He said, Clara, you need to understand. You're not supposed to be here. What do you mean? I asked, heart pounding. He hesitated. There was an intern here years ago, someone like you. She worked tirelessly day after day, but the office, she was forgotten. Nobody noticed her. When she left, it was like she never existed. The system erased her. And it seems you're next. I felt my blood run cold. Next? Alex's eyes darted around nervously. You might think you're finishing tasks, leaving on time, living a normal day, but you're already slipping. Each day here, you fade a little more. If you don't leave soon, you'll join her, completely forgotten. Panic set in. I packed my bag, planning to leave immediately. But when I tried to exit, the hallway stretched impossibly. Doors led me back to the same cubicle. I could hear faint typing in the distance, my own fingers moving across a keyboard that wasn't there, creating documents I couldn't read. I began running, but the office had changed. The lights flickered, cubicles stretched into infinity corridors. And the staff appeared, but only as shadows. Their faces blurred, their movements jerky and unnatural. They didn't see me, they didn't acknowledge me. Hours or days passed. Time no longer made sense. I found myself back at the same corner where the forgotten intern had appeared. Her shadow flickered before my eyes. I tried to speak, but my voice had no weight, no meaning. She turned, motioning silently, a warning I couldn't hear but understood. I finally understood. The office doesn't just erase its forgotten interns, it traps them. Slowly, imperceptibly, it devours their existence. One day, you notice nobody remembers your name. The next, you don't exist in files, emails, or even memories. The system absorbs you, keeping your consciousness tethered to cubicles, documents, and endless meaningless tasks. I don't know how long I've been here. Maybe a few days, maybe a few months. The lights flicker, computers hum, and my hands type endlessly, repeating tasks I don't understand. I see new interns arrive, bright-eyed, excited. I watch them from the shadows, silently hoping they never notice me. Because once you're forgotten, the office never lets go. It isn't just a workplace, it's a trap, a slow erasure, a phantom of cubicles and fluorescent lights where interns fade into nothing, leaving only whispers behind. Sometimes in the quiet moments, I hear the clicking of keys that aren't mine, typing that doesn't stop. I know I'll never leave, and when the next intern arrives, I'll be there, a shadow in the corner, silently warning them, silently hoping they escape.